Welcome to A Slice with Dice, where education meets inspiration and leadership meets real life. I'm Corey Alderdice, Executive Director of the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts. With 2 decades in school leadership, I'll share what I've learned from walking the tightrope between policy and practice, especially when it comes to doing right by gifted students and their futures. Ready to dive in? Here's this week's Slice. There was always a copy of the Farmer's Almanac sitting on top of my grandparents' refrigerator in their rural Kentucky home. Same spot every year. Its yellowing cover carried that familiar, old-timey illustration of the sun and moon promising to help you plant your garden, predict the seasons, and maybe even plan your life a little better. It wasn't a book that you read cover to cover. It was one you consulted. A trusted voice that told you when to expect the first frost, when to plant your beans, and somehow even when to wean a baby from a pacifier. It was equal parts science, superstition, and storytelling. And recently I learned that the 2026 edition will be the last one ever printed. After more than a century, the Farmer's Almanac will finally close the book on its long, quirky, and oddly comforting run. I'll admit, I felt a little pang of sadness when I read that, because while it might seem like just another bit of nostalgia fading into history, the almanac represented something bigger. It was one of those rare things that helped ordinary people map a little order onto the chaos of life. Even as a kid, I found that fascinating, the idea that a paperback booklet printed months before the year began could tell us something about what was coming. And of course, it wasn't really right most of the time, but that didn't seem to matter because it wasn't about accuracy, it was about assurance. And if we're honest, we all still crave that kind of assurance, just in slightly more modern forms. Maybe that's why we love personality tests, zodiac signs, and what Hogwarts house are you quizzes. These are all just attempts to make sense of ourselves and the world around us. They take the infinite mess of human experience and try to organize it into neat, understandable categories. We all from time to time say things like, well, I'm an INFJ, or I'm a type 3 with a 2-wing, or I'm a Virgo, so you know how that goes. And while it's easy to roll our eyes at that, it's also kind of beautiful. Because what we're really doing is trying to see ourselves and be seen by others in a world that doesn't come with an instruction manual. Somewhere online, I came across a comment that still makes me laugh. It said, "The Enneagram and Myers-Briggs are just astrology for the LinkedIn crowd." And honestly, it's perfect. Because both the old Farmer's Almanac and our modern personality frameworks are chasing the exact same thing: a sense of predictability in the unpredictable. Now, you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with school leadership? And I think the answer is quite a bit. Because if you've ever sat in a faculty meeting trying to plan the next year's schedule, written a strategic plan, or looked at a spreadsheet full of test scores, you know exactly how strong the temptation is to forecast. To believe that we just collect enough data, if we just organize the calendar right, if we just find the perfect leadership framework, we can make sense of the mess. And to be fair, some of that's necessary. You can't run a school or lead any organization on vibes alone. Systems matter. Structure matters. Accountability matters. But there's a difference between using a system and worshiping it. Because leadership, like farming, lives in the weather. The real stuff happens in unpredictable moments: the sudden storm, the unexpected frost, the student who's struggling, the teacher who's overwhelmed, or the parent who just needs to be heard. Frameworks and plans help guide us, but they can't account for everything. The world and the people in it don't fit neatly into charts or quadrants. You see, the Farmer's Almanac couldn't stop a drought, but it could remind you to keep an eye on the sky. Maybe that's what leadership really is. It's the balance between planning and paying attention, between metrics and meaning. So when I think about it that way, I realize how much of our modern leadership culture mirrors that same old impulse behind the Almanac. We crave clarity. We want the forecast. We want to know that if we make this decision today, it'll lead to sunshine tomorrow. But the truth is, leadership is much less about forecasting and much more about field work. It's about showing up, reading the conditions, adapting, and trusting that your roots are deep enough to withstand whatever weather comes your way. That's why some of the best school leaders I know aren't the ones who chase every new model or framework. They're the ones who stay grounded. They listen. They watch. They adjust. They understand that leading a school is part science, part art, and in most cases, a whole lot of faith. When I first read that the Almanac was ending, I thought maybe that meant we were losing something, some little bridge between the past and present, but now I think it might be symbolic of something else. We're living in a world where everything can be measured, tracked, even optimized, yet somehow we're always still searching for meaning. We're still looking for patterns in the stars or spreadsheets. Maybe the lesson of the Farmer's Almanac isn't about forecasting at all. Maybe it's about faithfulness. The idea that you can't control what's coming, but you can prepare. You can plant the seeds. You can keep showing up even when the clouds roll in. Because no matter how advanced our predictive tools become, there will always be something deeply human about wanting to know when to plant, when to rest, and when to start again. I'll always remember that copy of the Farmer's Almanac on my grandparents' refrigerator. It was never pristine. Pages were dog-eared, notes scribbled in the marges, smudges of dirt on the cover. It was, I think, in a way, a record of faith. A small, simple book that said, "The world might be unpredictable, but you can still take your best shot." In a time when we're surrounded by algorithms and dashboards that promise certainty, maybe we could use a little bit more of that humble, hopeful wisdom. Because leadership at its core is about tending to what's in front of you, doing the best you can with the conditions you've got, and believing that the work will bear fruit, even if you can't quite see the forecast. So yes, the Farmer's Almanac might be coming to an end, but the spirit behind it, the longing for rhythm, for guidance, for just a little bit of order in the chaos, that's not going anywhere. And maybe as school leaders, that's our real work. To keep reading the signs, to trust our instincts, and to look up from the data every now and then and just watch the sky. A Slice with Dice is a production of Aldercube. Thanks for making time to reflect with me. If you're finding value in these episodes, I hope you'll subscribe and help spread the word. Until next week, lead boldly, listen closely, and keep pushing forward. I'll see you then.